Welcome to Duck Season Somewhere podcast. This episode is brought to you by the following sponsors. GetDucks.com, your proven source for the very best waterfowl hunting adventures. Argentina, Mexico, 6 whole continents worth. For 2 decades, we've delivered real duck hunts for real duck hunters. And USHuntList.com, because the next great hunt is closer than you think. Search our database of proven U.S. and Canadian outfits. Contact them directly with confidence. Boss Shot Shell's copper-plated bismuth tin alloy is the good old days again. Steel shot's come a long way in the past 30 years, but will never, ever perform like good old-fashioned lead. Say goodbye to all that gimmicky, high recoil, compensation, science, hype, and hello to superior performance. Know your pattern. Take ethical shots, make clean kills. That is the boss way. The good old days are now. It really is duck season somewhere for 365 days per year. Duck season somewhere takes me year-round to worldwide destinations where I visit with the most interesting people. I'm your host, Ramsey Russell. Join me here to listen to those conversations. This is Ramsey Russell, Get Ducks. It's duck season somewhere, and I am sitting on the final morning of Safari Club International in Reno, Nevada, and I've got a very special guest today. I've got some great stories, has hunted a lot. A lot of people here and around the country know him in his professional capacity. I know him as a client, I know him as a friend. I was introduced to our guest today, Mr. Bill Brewster, from a close Mississippi associate, Greg Kitchens, who was a incredible hunter, hunter of everything, everywhere, but his heartbeat and his passion was birds, and that's where he and I connected. As I became involved, in fact, Greg helped me to become involved in the Safari Club, and Dallas Safari Club especially, and as I became involved, he introduced me to friends of his, associates of his, and that's how I got to know today's guest, Mr. Bill Brewster. Bill, how are you?
Fine. Good to see you this morning, Randy.
Yes, sir. Bright and early before convention starts. We're out here. Thank you for meeting us early.
You bet. Anytime.
Bill, I see you every time at Dallas Safari Club, every time at Safari Club International. I know you to be a passionate and dedicated and serious hunter, but I know you also have other things going on here at this show. I know what you do kind of sort of for a living, but could you introduce yourself and maybe go through some of your credentials, your background to how you got here in this capacity as a professional?
Sure. Ramsey, I'm from Oklahoma. Grew up in southern Oklahoma. My dad was an avid bird hunter. That day, bird hunting meant quail. Mm-hmm. We would shoot doves on opening day, find a pond somewhere and do that. Do a little pond jumping for ducks. I didn't know about a decoy when I was a kid. And just grew up with a passion for hunting and for wildlife. And Dad was an early conservationist in that if we jumped a covey that had less than 8 birds, we didn't follow singles, for instance.
Really?
Dad felt if at least 6 birds got through the winter, they'd repopulate an area. So he was very strict on following limits and some things that he had in mind that really made a difference. And the only thing that I guess is against the law now, at that time, he was death on hawks. Oh. Hawks were, in his mind, one of the things that really affected the quail population. And in that day and age, it was not illegal. So Dad was very tough on hawks.
I've never met a bird hunter that liked a hawk.
Well, I haven't either, but you have to follow the law, whatever the law is. But anyway, from there, growing up there, went to college, got a degree in pharmacy, owned some drugstores in Dallas-Fort Worth area for a number of years. Got a chance to sell out and move back to our ranch in Oklahoma. And then ultimately ran for the state legislature, served 8 years in the state of Oklahoma legislature, the House of Representatives, and ran for Congress and served 6 years in the U.S. Congress. And at that point then decided, by golly, I better go make some money and have some fun rather than doing all the work I was doing. And my wife is an avid hunter as well. We've been very fortunate. We've hunted all over the world. and our daughter says we spent her inheritance out doing the hunting that my wife and I've enjoyed.
Y'all really have hunted all over the world, and I've had the opportunity to meet Miss Susie, and y'all are bird hunters for sure, or duck hunters, and I know you hunt big game also. You've not only hunted all over the world, you have accomplished what I'm chipping away slowly but surely. You've hunted ducks in all 50 states.
I've hunted all 50 states. There's no award for that or anything else, but a few years ago I figured out, golly, I've hunted in a lot of states. It'd be kind of fun to hunt in all 50 states.
Yeah.
And so we set that as a goal, started working toward it, and then you helped me with the 4 states that were going to be the toughest: New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Rhode Island. Finding the guy up there that could get us duck hunting in all 4 states.
That was the late Captain Adam Smith, and what a great character he was.
Oh, a great character. We had a good time and had good duck hunts. It was good all the way around. My friend Robin Siegfried from Tulsa, Oklahoma went with me, and he's hunted ducks all over the world as well, so it was a fun time.
You got into hunting. You actually got into hunting as a little boy.
Correct.
Quail hunting with your daddy.
My dad got me a single shot 410, little H&R break open single shot 410 for my 6th birthday.
And did you bird hunt with that gun?
Absolutely.
Really?
That is everything else. When I got bigger, he got me moved up to a 20 gauge when I was about freshman or sophomore in high school.
That era and that generation and that ethos, that ethos that real quail hunters had, it's almost like Norman Rockwell America that's faded in history in terms of the bird populations, the quail populations, but they were some of the most serious hunters I've ever met.
Oh, absolutely, and they were all interested in making sure there was habitat, making sure that the rancher was not overgrazing the ground out there, or quail had to have some cover. They were extremely serious about what they did, and I always had arguments about who had the best dog.
I've got a story about quail hunting. My wife's grandfather grew up in Red Clay Hill, Webster County, Mississippi. They were simple people, and 40 acres and 2 mules.
Yeah.
I only know 3 or 4 photos of her granddaddy to exist. One, it was him and his 2 mules. One of the earlier photos was him and his 6 brothers. They all served in World War II actual combat except for him. He had a disability, and the younger brother Frank was 16 years old, and they grew up such simple people that when the brothers volunteered to go to World War II, he wasn't going to let his brothers go without him.
Yeah.
So he went. They all went, and the 3rd photo that I can recall is him and a bird dog named Buster. And my brother-in-law told me this story. His granddaddy used to tell him that Buster was the best bird dog he ever owned. And that was back in the day. They had just 40 acres, and they farmed, and they fed themselves with their farm. And if he and Mama wanted to eat, what do you want for dinner tonight? Well, let's have some quail. They just turn Buster loose or the bird dog loose and go shoot a few quail.
Enough for dinner.
Come back and eat for dinner.
Yeah.
And he tells this story about this bird dog. He said, my brother-in-law tells it much better than I do, but he's like, my granddad used to say Buster was the best bird dog he ever had, and for the remainder of his life, he'd say, I sold that dog for $50 to a man out of Memphis. And one day, Stan asked him, he said, well, Papa, why'd you sell Buster for $50 if he's the best bird dog you ever had? And the man lamented the sale of that bird dog for the rest of his life because it was the one. He said, look, I could feed my family for 2 months on $50.
Yeah.
It was a whole different mindset of America. The people were cut from a different fabric, but
yes,
the whole bird hunter, the quail hunter enigma, it was something else back in those days, the day of your dad, the day you grew up.
Correct. And Dad was a school superintendent at a small rural school, and also coached basketball and drove the bus and everything else. And that day and time, the superintendent had to do it all. And he actually got offered $200 for a bird dog. He was an outstanding bird dog, and there was a guy there that was a car dealer that hunted with Dad and wanted to buy the dog. Dad was only making $300 a month as school superintendent, and he turned down selling his bird dog for $200. He said, "Yeah, we need the money," but said, "I'll never have another dog as good as he is."
I can relate to that in the world of labs. I've had some dogs that, whether they're the absolute best or not, I can't part with them for any amount of money. And that's something about how dogs affect your life like that.
They really do.
Now, I was out in Oklahoma 15 years ago, and I went out there to hunt wild quail with an outfitter up near, way up in the Panhandle, and it was old school quail hunting. It was he had GPSs on the dogs, he had feeders out, and he had, I'm gonna say the man had 150 tracts of property that he would lease or buy based on their quail habitat ability.
Yeah. Was it Wade Robertson?
Gosh, what is it? He was a retired U.S. Marine, and I'll think of his name in a minute. But he retired from U.S. Marines out in South Carolina, and as a young man retired, he could go anywhere in the country he wanted, and he chose Oklahoma for the quail hunting because the quail in the east had passed. He had dog power, but you walked. It wasn't a covered wagon like South Georgia.
No,
this was a walk.
Yes.
And even if and even if there were feeders, the birds weren't just sitting on the feeders. It might be in the plum thicket. It might be nearby, depending on what time of day and what was going on in their little daily schedule. But you walked. But it was wild quail.
It still is. Oklahoma's quite fortunate to have habitat that, given the proper climate, if we have decent rain this spring, proper time, we're a quail factory. And we're fortunate in that regard. My friend out at Derazette, Texas, Wade Robertson, and his father, Jerry Robertson, started hunting years ago out there commercially. They've got probably 150, 200,000 acres that they can hunt on, different ranchers that they lease the land. They keep feed out year-round for the quail. They have the feeder in a plum thicket, so the quail have a better chance of survival.
The hawks can't pick them off.
And they run a really good operation. It's a lot of walking, but I've done it several times, and boy, it's the way quail hunting should be.
It's the way it should be. And I noticed hunting with some of when you go on when I hunted, Keith Montgomery was who I hunted with. Keith Montgomery up in northwest Oklahoma, and he's still at it, man.
Yes.
And that man, I don't care who you were, you couldn't outwalk Keith Montgomery. he put too many miles as a Marine and too many miles chasing quail. That man would walk you in the ground. But I over the years, I just noticed, I began to see where the modern day quail hunter, the modern day setters, the modern day pointers that were so habituated to release quail.
Yeah.
It just they didn't have game. The modern quail hunter that was used to release quail, you turn him and his dog loose on a wild bird, and they just don't get it.
They don't know what to do.
And when a wild quail gets up, it looks like he's been shot.
Yeah.
I mean, out of a rifle barrel, he's gone versus a tame quail.
It's quite different, and I actually feel sorry for some of my friends that don't have the opportunity to hunt wild quail.
I really do too.
It's an era that is only found a few places anymore.
Parts of Texas, parts of Oklahoma, and Bill, I've never shot in a blind with you, but to a person, I've never met a true quail hunter. I mean, a duck is easy compared to a quail. When quail get out, a man that had grown up quail hunting, cut his teeth on quail, I would say are the best wing shots that I've ever spent time around.
Well, it certainly helps you because you have a quail never flies in a straight line. He's dodging, darting, going around a tree. He's doing something. Everyone's a little bit different. And duck hunting is a talent of its own as well. Most of the birds are incoming, where in quail, most everything's going away from you. But still, being able to have that hand-eye coordination and go to the bird, that's what it's all about.
That's exactly right. Well, what happened after you left? You grew up quail hunting and bird hunting and hunting with your daddy in Oklahoma. You became a pharmacist, a U.S. Congressman for 6 years. Then what?
After that, I was 53 years old, and it was time to either make a decision that I want to stay in Congress and run again, or did I want to go out and try to make some money and have some fun. I was offered a friend in D.C. asked if I'd like to join his consulting company, his government relations company. And I let my wife help me make the decision, and since it was going to pay a whole lot more than you can make as a congressman. And the big problem expense-wise at Congress is expenses in D.C. Rent, everything is so darn high, and you have, in Congress, you don't get paid any per diem, no housing allowance, no
I
nothing.
didn't know that.
Nothing. So you're on your own, and I'd done it 6 years, and being 53, I thought, golly, if I'm ever going to be able to do the things I want to do, I need to go out and make some money and have some fun. So I joined my friend's government relations consulting firm, Duffy Wall from Louisiana, great guy, great friend. A couple of months later, he came up with lung cancer, and so I took over running his firm till we could sell it for his wife, and then she had to have revenues for the future, and so we sold his firm for her and then put in my own company, and did that up until 3 years ago, and now I'm totally retired out of the government relations business. But during that time, my wife and I had the opportunity. Congress has gone a lot. When Congress had gone, my clients didn't expect me to be in D.C., so I could be in Africa, I could be anywhere. And we've never taken a vacation as such without going on a hunting trip. We've never taken a cruise. We do hunting, and my wife became sort of a collector, and it's like, well, she would say, well, golly, I don't have a bongo. I want to go to Cameroon and hunt a bongo. Let's work out a bongo trip. So it's great having your wife loving to do all this. The only bad thing is frequently you have to buy two of everything.
Right, yeah.
But no, I couldn't. Our life has been phenomenal. Every hunt has been an adventure, Ramsey. And you see without an animal having value, it won't exist. I've seen that especially in African big game, but everywhere. If an animal has value, if somebody has a value to it, it will exist. Otherwise, it's nothing more than meat to most of the natives as we see it in Africa.
I say it all the time about the commodity value of wildlife, but Bill, you talked about being retired. Having had your career and moved in some of the circles and being an influencer, not I don't want to say politics, I want to say conservation, because I know that you and your wife have been deeply involved with National Rifle Association. I know that y'all have been involved with Safari Club International and Dallas Safari Club, and you're retired from the everyday 40-hour whatever that business called for. But are you ever truly retired?
Well,
I mean, you're still here, and I know you're moving around in circles. I know. I recognize you as a very profound influencer in conservation and interest that would be important and of value to the listener. National Rifle Association, Safari Club International.
I've been very interested in wildlife, as I mentioned, since my dad got me hunting at a very early age, and as I've gotten older and had some resources to be able to do some things with. We spent an awful lot of money on youth hunting. We spent an awful lot of money on conservation programs in different places. That's our life. That's what we do.
Right.
I like to think the history, the things that we've done, the ranches we've owned, and what we've done to improve habitat have been a major player as far as wildlife are concerned. And we want to continue doing that as long as we can. If my history and experiences can provide some answers to someone and what they're trying to figure out, I like to do that.
Right.
And all I can say is, well, we did so-and-so and it didn't work because such and such, or we did so-and-so and it really worked out well. Mm-hmm. And so history and knowledge are something that we've got a little bit of, and we don't do it for business or profit. This is for fun.
Exactly. I've got a question for you. True or false? You once duck hunted with a U.S. president.
That is correct.
Could you tell that story?
Yes. We were at an event in summer of, I guess it would have been about 93, 94, and President Clinton was there. And he was telling some of us that he lamented the fact that he didn't have a place to duck hunt. He'd come to D.C. and When he was in Arkansas, he liked the duck hunt. So I said, well, Mr. President, that's no problem. Give me a call. I'll line us up a duck hunt over in Maryland. So didn't expect to hear any more from it. And Christmas Eve, it was on a Friday that year, I was in Oklahoma with my family, and the president's office calls and said, President Clinton has Monday morning off, and he wants to go duck hunting. And so they also told me that his requirements were that he would not go on any place that was owned by a lobbyist or any place that contracted with the federal government.
Of course.
So here we are on Friday evening trying to scramble and find a place to take him, and my late friend J.D. Williams helped me come up with a place. A guy named John Tyder had a duck hunting place in Maryland. And I didn't know it at the time, but the Secret Service, when I gave them the name, they were out there all over the place that weekend, checking everything out. 'Cause here the president's going to be out with some guys with guns. They allowed me to take one other member of Congress with me, and John Dingell from Michigan had been so involved in everything wildlife, and he was a guy I duck hunted with in Maryland. So I called John, and his first statement was, "Are you serious? I've been in Congress all these years. I've never hunted with the president." I said, "Well, Chairman Dingell, here's your chance. We're invited, and if you want to go, we'll love to take you." And he said, "Well, let me ask Debbie, and I'll call you right back." So I thought, golly, here Chairman of Energy and Commerce is having to ask his wife if he can go duck hunting with the president.
Yeah.
But she cleared it. We met the president, went over into Maryland, stopped to buy him a license that
Now,
morning.
when you say you met the president, y'all made it
At the White House.
At the White House.
We went in the old executive office building on the west end of the White House, and went in there carrying shotguns
I was wondering, yeah.
and gun cases.
Wearing your duck gear.
The president didn't have any duck hunting stuff up there. My dad was 6'5", and so I got my dad's coveralls and everything so we could keep him somewhat warm, and carried it all in there and walked in, and the guy at the counter there called upstairs and said, "I have 2 congressmen, and they have shotguns with them, and they're coming upstairs." And so the other guy said, "Well, have you ever said that before?" He said, "To my knowledge, you guys are the first ones who've ever brought shotguns to the White House."
Wow.
But anyway, this was during the time that people were complaining about semi-autos, trying to get a semi-auto ban.
Mm-hmm.
So I made sure the president was shooting a Benelli semi-auto, just to make sure that he understood the value of semi-autos.
That's right.
We went to Maryland. We had a great day. We got 1 duck. The warmest it got while we were out there was 6 degrees.
Oh.
Fortunately, they had a de-icer set up out in the one of the fountain deals out in the middle of the pond, so we had some open water. But we had a great time, and I disagreed with the president on a lot of policy issues. Disagreed with some of the stuff he did at the end when he let some people off some sentences that I thought were incorrect. On the other hand, I've always felt I could disagree with someone and still be agreeable, still enjoy time.
Especially in a duck blind. I've always said you can take different politics, race, colors, religions, economic strata, and put them in a duck blind, and in that moment they're just duck hunters.
Absolutely. And it was a fun time. President Clinton is just a bubba, just another guy, and enthusiastic, and you can't find people that don't like being around him, whether they agree or disagree with his politics.
I have heard from retired Secret Service people I've met and different people in his circles that he is one of the most likable and friendly people you've ever been around.
Certainly is, and I voted with him seldom in a lot of the issues of the day. But on the other hand, he will go down in history, except for his personal life, as a guy who served when times were good. No war efforts were going on, actually reduced the deficit. So with the Republican House and Senate working together, and in that day you worked together.
They sure did.
Today, unfortunately, it's not that way anymore. We would, in my time, we would disagree or agree in a committee, and then everybody would go have dinner together. And it's not that camaraderie anymore.
The political climate as a non-politician that I see on television, it reminds me of watching the Worldwide Wrestling Federation, where you had the good guy and the bad guy, but it was all kind of sort of a stage production, and nobody was getting along no matter what. And it's almost like a circus anymore. How's anything getting done up there?
Well, that's it. Really, nothing is getting done. Everything has been geared toward all the investigations and all the impeachment stuff, and it's my team and their team is kind of what it amounts to among a lot of the members today. And
but it's our team, the American team.
I know it's the American team, but it's not that way today. It's got to come back to it.
I hope it will
for the good of our country, for the good of wildlife, for everything. But as far as the hunting is concerned,
break before we move on now, because I want to get back to you went to the White House with Bill Clinton, and I've heard parts of this story. Y'all picked up Bill Clinton. Did you get in Suburbans or Secret Service vehicles? 'Cause I know you had to go get a hunting license.
We did. We got in a group of Suburbans, and they let my chief of staff go along with us as well, just kind of be the guy who took care of everything. We stopped in Maryland to buy him a duck hunting license. I was in there, a place called Anglers. I was in there frequently because I went over duck hunting a lot and fishing and everything else in Maryland. So we walked in, and the guy behind the counter knew me, looked at me, and he looked at Clinton, and it was like, I've seen that guy before, but I don't know who he is.
Where did I know you from?
He required him to produce an ID.
Really?
And he had it to the president's good fortune. He had a billfold and an ID. He didn't have enough money to buy his license. So he had to get some money from one of his Secret Service guys to get his license. And then we went on out to
Well, did the guy behind the counter, when he saw the name William Jefferson Clinton on the driver's license, did he recognize then who he was?
I think he did, but he didn't really do anything. He just went ahead and filled out his license.
Filled out his hunting license.
Yeah, like we're getting you a license. But it was really funny watching him walk in, and the guy looking at him like, I know I've seen that guy before.
Well, you know, it's funny how people put on a ball cap or sunglasses.
They look different.
Or you see him in a three-piece suit, and all of a sudden you see him in hunting clothes. You don't recognize, who is this?
Yeah.
I see it all the time. But the president, Bill Clinton, and at the time he was so televised.
Yeah, but still, that's the way it happened. And we had some interesting times. I took a bunch of people duck hunting that you would have never guessed. I took Joe Kennedy from Massachusetts duck hunting, and I didn't realize it, but his dad, Robert Kennedy, when he was Attorney General, had been an enthusiastic bird shooter and would go to Spain to shoot partridge.
Wow.
And Joe told me when he was a little boy, his dad let him go with him once, and but he'd never done any other hunting. So anyway, he wanted to go duck hunting. We took him duck hunting. We had a great time. And since then, he's actually invited me to come to Massachusetts duck hunting with him. So hopefully he's continuing the effort. But we had a lot of people we did that. Now we focus mainly on getting kids hunting. My wife and I do a lot of effort with young people. My wife's president of the Oklahoma Wildlife Management Association, and we take 40 kids a year through OWMA on their first deer hunt. We have several ranchers there that we use those kids to cull their deer herd. We have a guide with each kid. Take them out on a Friday afternoon to shoot a rifle and make sure they got a rifle sighted in, and then Saturday we're in a blind with them, and they and a guardian or parent, whichever's with them. Take kids between 12 and 17 years old. Last year we took 40. We had almost 300 applicants for it.
Wow!
And the state wildlife department does the screening, advertises it, does the screening, and helps us get the kids in line. But I'm amazed the demand out there. And if we don't give those kids an opportunity, get them out to see our way of life, we'll have a continued decline in the number of hunters. We dropped from about 16 million licensed hunters to about 11.5 over the last 10 years. And for our way of life, for wildlife, without hunting, you won't have wildlife because without the demand for animals. There'll be nothing
Correct.
more than food.
Well, I read a paper just last week about some of the state DNR budgets that are really,
Yes.
really hurting over hunter decline. And it's not just the funds for white-tailed deer and mallard ducks and bobwhite quail. It's so much of the conservation budgets for the states for pollinator habitat, for butterflies,
Everything.
for everything is
Yes.
being funded by the hunters.
Yes. You're exactly right. Hunting funds all the wildlife efforts in every state that I'm aware of. There may be some that get some appropriated money, and I'm on the Wildlife Commission in Oklahoma. But in our state, the only money the department has is what it collects in fees, and then also what it gets out of the tax it's on guns and ammunition, the Pittman-Robertson Fund. We're fortunate. Our state was the first one to put in a lifetime hunter program. We have an awful lot of people that bought lifetime licenses. The money can only be, the revenues from that money is all that can be spent. So it's built up in a pretty good amount of money that draws a pretty good amount to be used each year. But still, a declining number of hunters will be a declining amount of money to work with wildlife for habitat, for control of hunting. And conservation is no more than management. That's what it's all about, managing something for the benefit of the wildlife.
That's correct. And the humanity that
Yes.
values the benefit. I mean, all of society benefits, from that, from wildlife. It's like I had a guy in here yesterday from the Philippines, and he was explaining that in a country half the size of California, there's 120 million people.
Yes.
And he said there's declining amounts of wildlife, declining amounts of habitat because there's people, too many people.
Sure. And I'm fortunate. I live in a small county in Oklahoma. We have about 10,000 residents in the whole county. Most of my life has been in very rural areas, but I've been around the urban areas enough to know that there's certainly a difference. The kids in urban areas, they don't have the opportunities that rural kids have. And that's one of the reasons our hunting numbers are declining. So many kids today spend their time on social media, etc., and never have the opportunity.
There's a large disconnect. There's a large disconnect in wildlife versus the modern human. I mean, kids, to their credit, it's not just video games. It's high school sports.
Oh, sure.
It's social lives. It's going to church. I mean, it's so much demand. Like when I was a child, playing baseball meant, 8 weeks in the summertime.
Yeah.
And now it's a career. I mean, these parents have got these kids playing select ball 12 months a year. They don't have time, and if they do, they don't want to spend energy. They do want to just sit around because there's so much demand and social media and this whole. It really takes a lot more time to cultivate your personality and your friendships online than it does face to face, like we're talking right now.
Oh, sure. Yes.
And then I worry about public access. Back in the day, even when I was a young man, you can knock on a door.
Yes.
You can't knock on doors anymore. Where are these kids going to hunt? And we've got because of declining funds and declining interest, they're not making any more land, as Will Rogers said. There's more people needing somewhere to hunt that don't have anywhere to hunt.
That is correct, but like in our state, our wildlife department manages about 1.5 million acres.
Wow.
And some of it is draw only, and some of it is open to anyone to hunt. The wildlife department does a pretty good job of managing the properties.
Oklahoma does an excellent job.
And also in our state, a lot of ranchers out there, to be able to keep their land going for the future, need to maximize the revenues out of it as well. So there's very little land in Oklahoma that is not hunted. Some of it you got a lease, you may pay $2 or $3 an acre to a rancher for the right to hunt it year-round or hunt it maybe just during the seasons. We also have a walk-in hunting program there. It's similar to what Kansas, Nebraska, some of the other states do, that we get some federal money to help with as well. But we have opportunity if a person is truly interested. What we have to do now is make sure these young ones coming up have the interest that we've all had, and given the opportunity, they will. Every licensed person would take at least one kid a year out hunting, give them opportunity. I have a couple of ranches that I lease to people for hunting. I require that every hunter take at least one child, one youth hunter a year on my ranches.
Brilliant.
And it's a simple deal, but a group from Tulsa leases one of the ranches. There's 10 of them, and they'll take 10 kids hunting every year.
That's wonderful.
That's kids that probably would not have that opportunity otherwise.
There's a program I became aware of through Delta Waterfowl last year. When I went to Mississippi State University as a wildlife major, everybody, all 60 or 70 of us in that program, had grown up hunting and fishing. And we were becoming what I would describe as a hook and bullet biologist. And I was talking to a friend of mine who's now the associate dean at Mississippi State University, and he described to me that the program has now expanded to 300 people.
Wow.
And that 90% of those people did not have a hunting and fishing background. They were just attracted to nature and wildlife. And so I was sitting in a duck blind down in Mexico and with some of the Delta waterfowl people, and they began to describe to me an oncoming program they've got where they are going into Mississippi State and other universities and hosting and entertaining some of these up-and-coming wildlife biologists that don't have a hook and bullet background, introducing them to duck hunting. And he explained to me that some of these young people don't even want to hold a gun. That's against their deal.
Yeah.
None of them have hunted, and he said, you know, as compared to a deer, a bird doesn't, you know, when you shoot a bird, it's different. But he got describing to me how they would take some of these young people, these college kids that had never hunted, these girls, and I was just imagining some girl with blue hair and a nose ring or something, you know, that wanted to be a wildlife manager. But they would take them hunting, and he said, you know, whether they hunted or they didn't, whether they shot or they didn't, he said the minute we call and those birds hook up, start moving, all of a sudden something clicks, and they go, oh, wait a minute, I get it. And he said, you know, the purpose is not to make those people hunters, but they, in wildlife management, will become our future wildlife policy leaders, and we've got to make them cognizant and understanding of how that interaction falls in the role, where its role is in conservation, funding conservation, and to the benefit of humanity.
Yes.
We've got to keep that intact, and it's one of the most brilliant hunting programs I've become aware of.
Oh, I agree with you. I'd like to see more of that, and I'm also involved in another hunting group called Shikar Safari Club. We do 30 college scholarships a year, and we require the kid to be involved in wildlife management, to write a story about their background in wildlife, about what they hope to do in wildlife, and we give $5,000 scholarships.
That's fantastic.
So it's a way to try to help those kids who are truly interested and have an understanding, rather than just some city kid that's I don't know anything about it, but I want to go do it.
Right.
So we want to give them an opportunity, and the kids that have a background hopefully will go into it and enjoy it as well. It's a great life, really. I talked to our biologists at our Oklahoma Department of Wildlife. Most of them spend their whole career there, and they feel like they're accomplishing a lot. They do a really great job.
Bill, you grew up hunting in an area. You grew up hunting. Went to college. You gained political perspective. You've hunted with a lot of politicians. You've been an influencer in the hunting industry. So and you've traveled a lot. You've traveled a lot out of your backyard and seen different parts of the world. And I've noticed that as I've traveled, I've gained a slightly different perspective than I would have otherwise in Mississippi. So I'm going to ask you a question. Here we are sitting at Safari Club International. Break. Let me say this right here. I showed up to Safari Club International as an exhibitor 6 years ago. And all I would have told you about SCI at the time was it was a bunch of guys going to Africa shooting giraffes and zebras, and it was a big hunting show I needed to be a part of. That's all I really knew. And someone you know from Mississippi, Mr. John Green, came by that year and said, hey, what are you doing for lunch? And I said, well, I'm working. He said, no, come on up here and come sit at the table. And I walked into a room for lunch, and 3 of my 4 congressmen from Mississippi were in that room, congressmen from all over the country, and SCI members were pledging money because SCI was lobbying to get hunter-friendly politicians. And in that moment, I was 50 years old, and in that moment, I realized that Safari Club International is not a hunting show. It does for hunting what NRA does for firearm rights.
That's correct.
These guys are fighting for the future of hunting. Now, here we are at SCI, and I'm going to ask you, based on your perspective, where do you think the future of hunting is going, or what? I think that a lot of people listening and a lot of Americans that had I not traveled, had I not become a part of this agency, I would be seduced into thinking that this is America. Hunting will last forever. Everything's fine. But as I've traveled and as I've become involved with some of these organizations, it worries me that hunting is hanging by a thread worldwide.
You're correct. It truly is, and so much of it is because so many urban people have no knowledge of true wildlife conservation out in the areas where you and I are from. And their idea is, oh my God, the hunters are out here killing all the animals. Well, that's not true. The hunters regulated hunting. It's the only thing that's saving the animals. We're the ones that spend the money to prevent the poachers from going and killing that last giraffe you're talking about. The CITES organization, for instance, sets the quotas for a country like Namibia on how many elephants can be taken a year, how many giraffes, how many of anything that's a threatened or endangered species. CITES is a very scientific-oriented organization, and if they say 300 elephants are the quota that can come from Namibia, it's because that's a sustainable number of old bulls that can come out. Our group are the ones that provide the funding to prevent the bad things from happening. Now, the millions of people in Los Angeles, San Francisco, Detroit, Chicago, New York that look at the wildlife thing, most don't have that understanding. And that's why it's incumbent on us getting all the youth that we can an opportunity to see what we're doing. Our OWMA, I mentioned, we took 40 kids deer hunting last year. We took another 20 turkey hunting. But those are kids that would not have that opportunity. We make sure it's kids that have an urban background that would not have that opportunity otherwise. And that's just a few. But if you take a kid and they take out a doe and understand the reasons of why they're doing it, because we go through that as well at breakfast, lunch, and dinner with them, they are going to be an influence on their classmates then. And their classmates will know someone who really has done something with wildlife. It is hanging by a thread. I did a presentation to a group in France with the EU wildlife people back in November. And they've got the same problems we have. They have declining numbers of hunters. The Nordic countries are doing quite well. The heavily populated countries, the UK, France, Germany, etc., have a pretty big decline. So they're working on the same things we are, trying to recruit and retain individuals, young people, and the whole thing is give them an opportunity to see what it's about.
I look from the outside looking in. I think of it when I go to Holland, where, boy, I tell you what, the anti-hunters, or Australia, it becomes an issue of political relevance, and political relevance meaning money, economic benefit. As I perceive a politician or people in leadership look at it as a political relevance, money, and it always brings me back to now. I hunt and I kill stuff, and I own that because I'm a hunter and I kill stuff. But while I eat the ducks I shoot and the deer and the wildlife, and if I'm in Africa, my gosh, all the game over there is so delicious. But at the same time, I'm really not hunting in the year 2020 for subsistence. I'm hunting for recreational value.
Right.
And it's so hard to explain to people that don't hunt how that recreational interest translates into conservation, especially if you're talking to an anti-hunter. They just don't get it. And even the middle ground, the non-hunters, it's very hard to articulate. When I see, or what I've learned is, whether it's a southern pine tree or a cotton boll or a tomato or an elephant or a leopard or a white-tailed deer, it's the commodity value that my recreational interest places on that animal that allows it to be managed and conserved into perpetuity. And it's really no different than my recreational interest in football. Watching somebody throw a ball up and down the field translates into $100 million that some of these players make.
Sure.
Put that $100 million, put that interest onto wildlife, and they benefit in the same way. Am I right?
Sure, absolutely. And you've mentioned Africa 2 or 3 times. In the very remote areas, there are no jobs. People are on a subsistence type setting. They'll plant a few rows of corn. It's food for some little village of 40 huts. If the elephants come in and destroy it, they don't have food. Now, to tolerate that elephant, if they are going to get to work as trackers, skinners, something in that where they have an income, and in many of those areas, if they have $500 or $600 a year as an income, they're doing well. Well, the trackers, skinners, they do quite well. Professional hunters provide schools for their kids. So the animal has value in that regard. Without the animal living there, that would not occur. So you have a population of elephants. There's an old bull. If some hunter is coming to hunt that old bull, and you've got 20 of your tribesmen that are going to be out there as skinners, trackers, everything related to it, that affects your life. The animal has to have value.
The economy of those elephants coming through the community benefits their children in schools and water.
Right.
We take water
Plus
for
they
granted.
Get the food.
They need water out in those parts of the world.
Absolutely.
They need modern amenities that, as that money starts coming through those communities, their children, their families, other families benefit. Whereas if there's no value on that elephant, then it's just something tearing up their houses and their watermelon crops.
It'll be gone. And the same thing in our state, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of the ranchers are very interested in leasing their land now for hunting. Okay, if they don't have any game on their land, nobody's going to want to lease it.
Right.
So they're going to graze it a little lighter. They're going to take better care of the habitat on it, so they can earn an extra $1,000, $2,000 a year out of their the land, and that just helps running a few cows on it and everything else if you got some extra income. So I'd say that probably 80% of our private land in Oklahoma is either leased for hunting or hunted by the owner. And so there's very little land that's not properly managed and hunted in my state. The Wildlife Department helps private owners as well with management and the biological side.
The state of Mississippi has a very good program like that also. They really, the state of Mississippi, you hear them beat up left and right about this, that, and another, but the state of Mississippi Department of Wildlife really does a very good job helping private landowners manage their resources, and a lot of states I've been to do have services like that. But Oklahoma, as somebody that visits your state frequently as a hunter, y'all do a very, very good job.
Well, thank you. I think our department does a great job, and both on hunting and fishing. And we happen to have more miles of shoreline than the East Coast in my state, so we've got to talk about fishing a little bit. But that also benefits the ducks. It benefits everything. It's all in it together. If you're benefiting one kind of wildlife, a hunting kind, for instance, you're also benefiting butterflies and raccoons and everything else out there as well.
It all works together.
Habitat is dependent on all of it.
I had a guy in the booth a couple of days ago, a wildlife geneticist, and he's got the scientific proof to back up the hypothesis that scares me to death about the wild mallard duck genetic. And then I can think of other habitats, other issues, other things that are important to me as a hunter in my home state. My question to you, from your perspective and your knowledge, and what can the average guy listening do? I mean, I know I can go to the polls and pull a lever and get one vote out of 330 million Americans at election time. But what can I really do? I can join Safari Club International. I'm a life member. Bill, what can the average guy in America do to have a meaningful impact? And I want to say in politics, but how can I do this? How can I get hey, I've got a problem down here in Southwest Louisiana. I've got a problem with matter genetics. What can the average guy do in America?
Well, the average guy can get in politics. He can talk with his representative, his senator. They want to hear from people, not just at election time, but they want to hear what your thoughts are on wildlife, on management of wildlife, on habitat. Keep in mind, I was a rural guy, and I don't really know how things are done in the cities. I'm sure quite different. But we had meetings all over my 21 counties in southeastern Oklahoma, and I was open to the world to ask me any question they would like or give me their opinion on anything that they like. And I valued those opinions because they were the ones on the ground. They were the ones out here that owned maybe a little chunk of land, maybe a big chunk of land. But they all had thoughts and ideas about how it could be better for wildlife, how it could be better for hunting, how it could be better for the future for our children. And everyone has that opportunity. Just check out your representative, your senator, or your congressman. They all have times there, not just fundraising events, but they'll have a town hall meeting, etc., where you can talk with them. They all have staff in the district as well.
Right.
And those staff relay to the congressman the feelings of the people.
That's their job, isn't it?
That is their job.
So if there were an issue in your backyard,
I would,
if enough people call the congressman's staff and they're just a phone call away, that congressman would say, wait a minute.
And those staff will come look at it.
Yeah.
You have some kind of a water problem or whatever it may be, call the representative and senator's office, and they'll send someone to talk with you and get your opinion and look over the issue and relay it to him. That's the way the system works.
That's the way the system works.
And everybody's opinion counts, and so don't be bashful. Just contact the people, tell them the importance of what you're talking about, and get their staff involved in helping.
Bill, thank you very much for your time. I know it's very important, and I know you've got a lot to see and do here at this convention, and I greatly appreciate you getting up early this morning and meeting with us.
Well, Ramsey, I always enjoy talking about working with wildlife. Anything that's pretty much been my life for a lot of years now, and we enjoy it.
Thank you. Guys, Ramsey Russell, Get Ducks. It's duck season somewhere. You've been listening to a fireside chat, a nice conversation with Mr. Bill Brewster from Oklahoma. Thank y'all for listening.